So here's the finished R9 motor. Let's get her in the chassis so we can test her on the dyno. Welcome to the Seton Tuning dyno cell. This is our Yamaha R9 and I've been spending a lot of time in this cell working on this bike over the last few weeks. So we got this bike around about 3.5 weeks ago, and originally we couldn't get into the ECU, so we have managed to get an image out of the ECU, and our good friends at Woolwich have now managed to put that up so that you can now access the ECUs on the UK spec Yamaha R9. Very first thing that we did was we flashed the ECU with the bike in completely stock form. So standard, this bike made 107.8 horsepower, I think it was, and then after the flash we managed to find horsepower everywhere, taking it up to a massive 110. So that was good enough for our first test, which was basically, it was a smooth tractable power curve and it was usable. So we went on track, we used it, we diagnosed there was a lot more problems with the bike. So then we came back and we wanted to increase power and reduce weight. So increasing power, the first step that we did with that was with our development Seton tuning exhaust system, and we played around with various different things with airboxes. So for the second test, we ran a DNA airbox lid. That gave us around 69 foot-pounds of torque and 120 horsepower, which was a nice healthy upgrade, 10 horsepower increase. We also took 10 kilograms out of the weight of the bike. So we managed to reduce lap times with that, which was very good. So both of those setups are now available basically. We have a stock bike flash, which will remove all of the restrictions that there are within the ECU, allowing your bike to breathe properly and rev through correctly and remove speed limiters. That's available right now. So if you want to post your ECU in, we can do that for you as a postal flash, which will get you going and get the bike to work instantly, infinitely better than it does straight from the factory. The next level will be with with our Seton tuning exhaust system. So we were at 120 horsepower using the DNA airbox lid. Now that airbox lid gives you an increase in torque for the bottom end, and when I say bottom end I mean up to 8,000 RPM. From 8 to 9,000 RPM it mirrors our other setup, which was with an MWR high efficiency filter, and then over the very top with those as a direct comparison there's a fractional decrease running the DNA airbox lid. So we used that for our test there. So after that, we then came back and we wanted to increase power further. So we put in our stage 1 camshaft and we raised compression just slightly with the head gasket. And then we set this bike up. We also, in the meantime, had been developing and playing with some bell mouths. So the bell mouths took the power up to 121, I think it was 121.5 horsepower, and took torque up fractionally as well. But the bell mouths only work with the standard airbox lid using an MWR filter. I mean, you could use another filter, but the standard airbox lid I think is the important factor here, because when you start revving the bike further and you use the bell mouths to get it to hold power for longer, you then lose that power if you run the DNA airbox lid. So we're scrapping that in terms of a bike for the track, and we are continuing with our development using the standard airbox lid. Now, the stage 1 camshafts went in and they made an enormous difference. Now the standard camshaft is very low lift and not very long duration. So we were able to increase lift everywhere and increase duration, and overall we got a gain everywhere, which is unusual because normally with a camshaft you're taking it from one place and putting it into another, but with such a low lift basic camshaft it was easy to exploit this in all areas. So we ended up with 132 horsepower and 70.5, I think it was, foot-pounds of torque. So that was what we did for our third test, where we knocked even more time out. You'll be able to see that in a video which I'll be releasing soon. And then today we've been on the dyno again and we've done some more exhaust testing. Now I'm pretty sure that we're happy now with the design that we've got of our Seton exhaust pipe, so we'll be ready to put this into production shortly. We need to do a couple more things now with noise to make sure that the system will pass noise testing with no baffle for UK track days. So we're working with that at the moment, but it shouldn't be very long. I'd imagine within the next month we'll have a production model available which you will be able to buy for your Yamaha R9. But today we managed to take power up to 133 horsepower and torque up to 71 foot-pounds of torque. So that's a pretty good increase really from the stock 107. So let's go and have a look at some dyno sheets, and I will show you the picture of the dyno sheet so you can actually see it in the graphical form. Okay, so let's have a little look at the dyno graphs. So the blue run here is the stock bike, which made a stonking 107.8 horsepower and 62 foot-pounds of torque on our dyno. So that was just after we'd run it in. It took us obviously a week or so to get the ECU unlocked. Once that was done, we were able to reflash and remove some restrictions. Now, we don't normally have restrictions in the UK. Normally it's something which you see in American ECUs, but not so much in the UK. But this bike definitely has. It shuts the throttle after 10,000, which you can see there. And by 11,000, there's like a 10 horsepower increase from the restrictions which are put into this bike. In addition to that, it really likes some ignition advance, as well as having the fueling set up a lot better. So those things together took torque up to 64 foot-pounds and horsepower up to 110. And that was how I took the bike for its first test at Snetton. And overall, this is what I consider the bike, how the bike should have been from the factory, really, without those restrictions. And it was nice to ride. It pulled through well. You know, everything about it was good. It just needed more grunt and a bit less weight and a few other things on circuit, but we'll talk about the horsepower here now. Okay, so that was basically where we got to with just a flash, and that is available now. So that's for a stock bike with the stock filter. If you've got an R9 and you want to have your bike unlocked so that it hasn't got all of the restrictions in it, you can send us the ECU and we can put this map straight onto it for you, or alternatively you can book in and we can do a custom mapping session for you as well. Then from there, the next level which we developed was our exhaust system and bell mouths. So the exhaust system obviously removes the catalytic converter. It's a much longer system as well. It runs a silencer up the side of the bike, so we could get the tertiary length correct, or what I consider to be correct as a start point. So it's only a development system, and I'm pretty sure we're going to make this a bit better in this top end area. But overall, as a start point, it's very good. I was quite happy with that. The bell mouths themselves made quite a big difference as well. Now you can see here it's not that massively noticeable, but the horsepower drops just there, and it drops continuously with the standard exhaust system and standard setup on there. But with the bell mouths, this just continues to hold. So we'll be able to rev this further. We originally were testing this with a rev limit at 11.5, and it was you know, holding it well to there. So that was where we did our second test at Snetton and managed to knock about 2.5 seconds, I think it was, out of the lap times, or 2.3 seconds out of the lap times that we did at that track. But yeah, it was, again, really nice to ride at that point. And there's two options of what we can do here, because you've got the DNA stage 1 filter, which it fills in this area at the bottom here. It gives about 5 horsepower more up to 8,000. Then it sort of is the same up to 9. And then from 9, it's virtually identical. It loses a very small amount over the standard airbox with a MWR filter. But the moment that you have the bell mouth kit in there, the increase at the top is considerably better without the DNA stage 1 airbox lid, and with the standard airbox lid and an MWR high efficiency filter. So that's what we've continued to work with, because ultimately on the track, which is where I'm working this bike for more, you're not going to be really using it below 6,500 RPM. So you're still at partial throttle up to 8,000, and then from that point you're going to be at full throttle. So the advantages which you're going to get in this lower area are not going to be anywhere near as great as they would be, say, if you were riding on the road. Now, if you were riding it on the road, maybe it would be nicer to have the DNA airbox lid, giving you more torque and more grunt at the bottom end, and still 120 horsepower at the top. So which hopefully will be 122 by the time we've finished. We've got a few other things to try as well with our fuel pump mod, which we haven't tested on the R9 platform yet, but we will do in the near future. So from there, after that testing, we brought the bike back, and then we managed to put in our stage 1 camshafts. So these cams are an increased lift camshaft. The standard cams which are in the engine are very low state of tune, really. They're a shopping bike engine, and it's designed to do mileage for a very, very long time, not give the ultimate performance. So there was quite a lot that could be exploited with these camshafts in terms of duration and in lift and in profile. So overall, we've ended up with a camshaft which has made more horsepower absolutely everywhere. The only caveat to that is I did actually change compression fractionally by adding or by putting a different head gasket in, so I increased the compression ratio slightly, closing up the squish. But overall, as you can see, the transformation at the top end is enormous. Now, part of that is due to the fact that these cams work better at the top end, as do the bell mouth. So everything is now phasing in together, giving you this extra increase at the top end. But overall, we have an 11 horsepower increase from 121 up to 132, and torque up to 70.5 foot-pounds. and it's also a much smoother shaped curve as well. It's much nicer. So overall, that's a pretty big increase. Now, as well as that, horsepower also holds all the way through to 12,000 RPM. So that means that you can run slightly lower gearing, which is what we tested out, and not lose your top speed, which means that you come off the corner even higher up the rev range. So that torque, which I was saying we lose in that area compared to the DNA airbox, is even less of an issue because you're coming off the corner higher up the RPM range. And we're going to do more work with gearing, certainly at Snetton, but at other circuits as well. So Snetton's my test track, which I've been doing everything on to start with because it's local and I know the track well. So it's not like I'm learning the circuit and getting faster myself. I'm literally riding pretty much exactly the same every time I ride it, and then the changes to the bike are what's showing us the increases in speed or reduction in lap time. But there you go, that is now what I'd consider to be quite a competitive sort of package. 70 foot-pounds of torque and 132 horsepower. It's a really, really good starting point for anybody who wants to go racing, and that's low cost. And also I'm still pretty sure it's going to be super high reliability because the compression ratio is still incredibly low on this engine. So I think that this is a very solid movement forwards from the 107 that we started at. In fact, let's have a little look at that. I'll show you. Now here's the dyno graphs for our stock R9 versus our stage 1 with Seton exhaust system, Seton bell mouths, fully set up and fleshed and set up on the dyno. You can see it looks like a totally different motorcycle. RPM holds on now all the way through to 12,000. It might even be able to be rev further. It's got an increase in power and an increase in torque. So we've gone from 107.8 to 133.48. So nearly 133.5. It is a little bit of a nipple there, but it's made the number. And 71.2 foot-pounds of torque from 62. So essentially this is a totally different bike and very, very lively and exciting to ride. Exactly what you would want from your R9. So we're back in from our first session at Snetton. So this run out is with our new spec motor. This is what we call in our stage 1, which is essentially a set of reground cams and a fractional raising compression. So today we're going to have a little work on the suspension. So we're going to start by popping these springs out, measuring the air gap, and then making some little changes because it feels to me like there's too much oil in there. It feels like it goes stiff at the bottom of the stroke, and it also feels like we need a little bit more support from the spring. So we'll crack on with this and then see how we get on later. So a quick bit of info for any of you out there. The stock suspension, we've taken the springs out at the minute and we've got this jacked up at an angle. So with no springs in there, the inside of this stanchion here goes up inside the tube and touches the inside of the cap there and leaves you 16 mil of unused travel at the bottom. So if your travel marker shows you've got 16 mil of unused travel, you are as hard bottomed as you can possibly be. So now with the caps off, remove the springs and then you push the damper rod all the way down on both sides. And then what we've done is we've got a sucker tube down there, and we have measured this. Now you've got to remember that the fork is at a slight angle, so the only way you can get an accurate measurement is to do it in the centre of the fork here, because you can imagine the level of the oil is going to be slightly skewed off. If you do it in the centre, then that's going to give you a pretty accurate measurement. So we've measured both of these and they're coming out at 95 mil. So it looks like we have got a 95mm air gap and what claims to be 5-weight fork oil. So the springs which are in there as well, we were thinking they may be progressive. Somebody mentioned to us that the MT-09 has got progressive. They definitely don't look like a progressive spring to me. They look like a linear spring, and they've already been measured by K-Tech and they come out at 98, I think it is, newtons, or 9.8 kilos. So that's a pretty stiff spring to start with, which is obviously why it was quite good. So quite happy with that. We're going to go up a spring rate though. We're going to go up to a 9.5 and we're going to drop this air gap down to, I think we'll start by dropping it to 125 mil. See if we can get it so it's softer at the bottom of the stroke and then come back if we need to. We've reset the air gap now, drop that down to 125 mil, and we are now inserting some new K-Tech springs. So these ones are 10.5, so we've gone up from 9.8 to 10.5 and obviously reduced the air gap. So the springs themselves are about 2mm longer than standard. The ones which came out, or maybe 3, the ones which came out were like 227 mil, and these ones are 230 maybe half a mil under that. So just a fractional difference in preload which will be necessary with it, but obviously we'll measure that with a slacker anyway. And now we're going to put these back together. So that's the springs in, added a little bit of preload to it. They're all set up. Now we need to set the sag, and we're going to use a handy little tool called a slacker. So this has got a magnet on the other side of it which sticks to the fork. It's got this cable which runs up, which we mount at the top, and then with the front wheel off the ground we just zero it, and then we are going to put some weight onto it, give it a quick bounce so it settles, and then we're going to try and set this to 28 millimeters as our start point, and then see where we need to go from there. Okay, so now with the fork springs in, we've set some preload onto this, and now what we need to do is set the sag. So to do that, you need to have the bike bounce back to a neutral position with no brake on. So I give it a little bounce and I let it settle, and we've got 28 mil, which you can see there. We've just set this up a minute ago. We actually had to back off quite a lot of preload, so we're now only running 3 turns of preload with those fork springs, but they are 3 millimeters longer, so that's the equivalent of 6 mil of preload that we would have had before. But even so, the actual number of, the amount of turns which you do of preload are pretty academic, really. The most important thing is where we start with our sag measurement. So we'll start with that, and then we'll see where we need to go. Okay, so it's been a pretty successful day at Snetton. It's the first day of a 2-day test, and today we've been playing around with suspension. This bike has now got our stage 1 work done on the engine. So this is a regrind on the cams, a slight change in compression, and it made a stonking 132 horsepower, along with our bell mouth kit, which we developed in the week, and our exhaust system. These things together have given it that horsepower. As well as that, it's also holding power all the way through to 12,000. So what we've got is a bike which has got more power and the ability to rev further. We tried shortening the gearing today, and I'm finding that I'm a little bit between gears in places. So I need to do a little bit more work on that and work out what's going to be the best solution for it at Snetton. We also worked on the suspension. Today we took the forks apart, measured the air gap. We went for some stiffer springs whilst dropping the air gap down quite considerably. That made things much better in the middle of the corner, but made it worse under braking. So we've gone back to a softer spring and increased the amount of oil, but still lower than it was as standard. And I've found what is a much happier sort of compromise. I still don't quite have the mid-corner grip that I'm looking for, but I do have much better stability under braking and the ability to run high entry speed. The rear shock is giving me reasonably good grip. For stock suspension, it's very impressive. I've got to say, this bike is looking really good. So lap times today, we've managed to get yet more time out of the lap, which we're really, really pleased with. We've taken the lap time which we did last week. So last week we managed a 1 minute 59.85, and we've managed to take that down now to a 1 minute. Oh, it's just changed. Wonderful. Let's bring it up again so you can see it. There we go. We've managed to get lap times down to a 1 minute 58.55. So it's quite difficult on a track day to do those sort of lap times. You've got lots of other riders which you need to negotiate and get past safely. But yeah, not bad. I'm quite happy with that. We're making steady progress. So this is only the 3rd time that I've ridden this bike, and we've already got well below the 2-minute bracket on this circuit, which is pretty good. If anybody knows Snetton, if you can get sub 2 minutes on a track day, you're doing quite well. To get down to 58s, I'm very happy. So I think we're going in the right direction. So let's hope that this time, there was still some flies on the front of the camera, but let's hope that that video or that footage is going to be usable. If not, I'll try and do another one tomorrow and see what we can do. So as a quick breakdown of what we did with the suspension, during the 2-day test, we started by stripping out the forks. We reduced the air gap, increased the spring rate. We then went back with the spring rate, still with a reduced air gap. And that was our best setting that we found with the front fork. After that point, we then worked with geometry. So we lifted the front, we then lowered the front, we then lifted the front back up and lifted the rear. And this again was our best setup, but we ended up still with a problem with ground clearance. So the next thing which we're going to have to work on is lifting the bike further, and we're also going to need to do some work internally inside the forks because they're still stiffening up at the bottom of the stroke, but it looks like now that's being caused by a hydraulic bump stop, which there is in the bottom there. So we're going to do some work with that. So that's a quick breakdown of where we got to with the suspension. You'll be able to have a look at the quickest lap and also the crash which I had. If you listen on the quick lap, you can actually hear on the left-hand corners the engine casing touching down on the ground. That is ultimately what caused the crash. I was trying to avoid another rider and I ran in, you know, a little bit wide and then leant it over and just touched the casing down, which lifted the front and then made me crash. But fortunately, we're working our way through all of these things. It's a slow, steady process of development, but we're finding all problems and working our way through it. So the next thing which you will have on track will be a bike which will have another level of modification to the suspension, and that will be quite interesting to see where that goes, considering we're still working with stock suspension. We're getting good lap times. So yeah, check out the videos, let us know what you think. Well, thanks for watching this far through. You clearly like my content if you're watching it this far down the video. To grow this channel, I really need your help. So it would really help me if you guys could like and subscribe to the channel. It will make a massive difference to me, and I will try to keep creating engaging content to keep you guys interested. Thank you very much.